So Stuart, you're now 60 and you said, I want something else in my life. I don't want to, I don't, I practiced medicine, I saved lives, it was very, very gratifying, but now it's time for something else because life is short and obviously you just didn't want to spend the rest of your days practicing medicine. So, like, how did you get out of it? What was like, was there any, post-medicine blues? How did your friends, feel towards it? Your wife, Giselle, your family, what was the reaction and what were you thinking? And how difficult was the transition?
Well, sort of several things coincided. One is that I mentioned before that I'd met this old colleague who was a close friend, and we'd built businesses together and they were sold. So I didn't actually need to practice medicine, continue practice medicine as a means of a living, making an income. Mm-hmm. So I was very fortunate in that. But something else happened, and I'd been in a medical partnership with a guy who I thought was a superb physician. And we were partners for 30 years. And he developed a brain tumor and he died. And life was very lonely. He was my sort of medical brother, and he had died. And I realized also I didn't need to practice medicine anymore for these neurotic reasons. Neurotic, I suppose, is not quite the right word. The decisions I'd made when I was a kid, mm-hmm. I didn't need to fulfill those dreams anymore. And so here was a bonus. Here was an opportunity in life to find out what I might have done if I hadn't been a physician, and began to explore. And
did you have weird reactions from friends and family?
Oh yes, they thought I was bananas. I mean, I had a successful practice. I had a wonderful band of patients. I was I was fortunate in that I suppose I was well liked, and my wife was very upset with me that I was going to leave practice, and she got phone calls from a whole host of my patients. Why was he retiring? How could he leave me? Mm-hmm. And but I had made up my mind that there must be other things in life other than the practice of medicine. And I trained in psychotherapy, and I knew the notion of a transition object. And for me, that transition object was I became a pilot and went off and did pilot training and did quite a lot of flying in the world, and enjoyed that enormously. But I rediscovered, I should say, my passion, which was to write. I'd had a couple of novels published when I was in my 20s, which sold quite well, but I didn't want to be a mountain novelist then. I wanted to actually practice medicine. Mm-hmm. I'd broken my leg skiing when I was in my 20s and was on a toe-to-hip plaster. Mm. And a guy called Michael Crichton, you probably heard of,
yeah, a little bit,
who'd just written his first book. And I read The Andromeda Strain, and I thought, yeah, that's good. I could do one of those. Mm-hmm. And I did. And I got it published, and it sold quite well, and it was fun. And I wrote another one, but I wasn't interested then. But I'd always promised myself I would go back to it after when I'd retired from practice. So I went to screenwriting school and film production school, etc. Learned a bit about film because I'd always been fascinated by story. And it was an area that I just enjoyed enormously exploring.
So how was the transition for you? Was there, a time where you felt lost? Was there a time that you felt empty and you had to fill holes? Did you feel like it was like the end of their life, like, very limited time left where you had to do these things? How did you, most people when they retire have an identity crisis. So was there any of that?
No identity crisis, because I still thought of myself as a doctor, but a doctor not of medicine necessarily, because I took my same database and I turned it around and started to write medical stories. So instead of actually practicing medicine and writing prescriptions, I turned my database around and began to write medical screenplays. The first ones were pretty lousy. Then they got a bit better, I would hope, and are getting better, I would hope. And I also started another business interest, which was to take the same medical database, and whereas I'd use my medical database to practice medicine initially, then use my medical database to start a medical laboratory. I now use my medical database to start a pharmacy business, providing patients with medicines in a fashion that they had not enjoyed before, and obviating the need to actually go to the pharmacy in the first place. And that's a whole other story, which I'd be happy to talk about, but it goes on a bit, and
Right.
I'll leave that for now.
But the loss of, the practice and going there every day and being in that routine, that didn't bother you at all? I mean,
Not in
you
the
felt you
slightest.
had a direction.
Yes.
So what would you recommend to other people that want to retire from a profession and go into chapter 2? So, and I want to just tell you this part. A lot of people don't know how to do that. They don't know how to identify it. They get afraid of doing it. And basically, they spend the rest of their lives, hitting golf balls, a little bit of tennis or a lot of tennis. And, it becomes a real retired life. And I guess there's nothing wrong with that.
There's nothing wrong with that other than a fundamental thing. They're not emotionally committed to it. They're not actually committed to a direction that would give them satisfaction. And that's, I think, what is necessary. You can do whatever you want to do, provided it's something that gives you an inner satisfaction of accomplishing something. You're not just spending day to day using what I call the bonus years as a waiting room to go off into that great hospital in the sky. You are actually doing something, feeling you're doing something constructive and valuable with your time.
Why is that so important?
I think everyone needs self-validation. Everyone gets a sense of their own identity by what they do and what they contribute. They have to have something to say in whatever form that may be for themselves. And
Could that possibly be just taking care of grandchildren or children?
I think that would be a part of the picture, yes. That certainly could be satisfying and very nice, but it's probably going to occupy 10% of their time, 15% of their time.
Good thoughts.
And there's going to be a large amount of time where they're sitting there looking at the garden outside saying, what am I going to do? And that is the time to actually be used constructively in actually giving themselves some inner satisfaction from pursuing a task and getting good at it.
So how do people identify, if people don't know what they want, do you have any recommendations for them how to do it?
I think you
Or
have
how to find it?
I think what you have to do is to explore, because if there's ever been anything that interested you as a kid, anything that interested you during your working life, any particular aspect of the business that you were in that wasn't mainstream, but you could actually become an expert in, if that's the only thing you could find. But I'm not belittling it. All I'm saying is what's required is for you to feel that you are exploring, and the time is being used to a specific direction, and that can give you some personal satisfaction.
And how do you spend most of your days now?
My
You're
days?
not flying now anymore, are you?
Not very much, because I've not been terribly well. Lost my license, but may get it back in the near future if I'm lucky. My days now, up quite early, read the newspapers, get current affairs, that's fine. Then I write for 3 or 4 hours, and then I read, not so much necessarily about technical topics, nothing like that. Certainly spend some time keeping up with my medicine, the bits of it that are interesting to me, but more specifically to look more generally at subjects I know nothing about, to see if any of them evokes any spark of interest and can fire the imagination, because that's the fundamental quality that one needs, to be able to fire imagination that actually will get your cerebral juices flowing.
Okay, thank you. We're going to go to one more.